It's all right to cry, to scream, to take time away. It's understandable to feel weak for a bit, so long as you learn to let that weakness go.
Grief is like a stone, and you carry it in your pocket, and you'll always notice it, you'll feel it, you know it's there. But as time goes on, you get stronger. And so as you get stronger, it's not that the stone goes away, it's just that it gets lighter.
People who process their grief allow themselves to face their pain, even in small doses. They address their feelings. They may write about them or talk about them. They mourn. When someone doesn't work through their pain, they try to distract themselves. They keep busy, they desperately avoid their pain, which in the long run leads to more pain.
Have you ever noticed that when an INFJ loses something, they don't just feel sad, they quietly rebuild their entire identity? INFJs make up about 1 to 2% of the population. But when they experience grief, they don't just grieve the event, they grieve the meaning. And meaning is neurological. Stay with me. Because today we're breaking down the architecture of INFJ grief and how to process it without losing yourself in it. Let me hit you with a statistic that is going to change the way you judge your grief. In a large US survey of bereaved adults, about 1 in 5 screened positive for prolonged grief disorder, and a lot of them also screened positive for PTSD and major depression. That is not being dramatic. That is grief becoming a health condition. So if you are an INFJ and your grief has lasted longer than people think it should, or it shows up in waves that embarrass you, I want you to hear me clearly. You might not be weak. You might be wired to process grief at the level of meaning, identity, and future timelines. Now here's the question. Why do INFJs look calm in grief, but internally feel like their whole life architecture is collapsing? Hold that thought. I'm going to answer it. Then I'm going to show you how to use AI tools to process grief with integrity without turning into a numb robot. INFJs are often described as rare, but the important part is not rarity. The important part is the pattern. Many INFJs do not just feel emotions, they search for what the emotion means. They search for what the emotion predicts. They search for what the emotion says about the relationship, the timeline, the future, the purpose. So grief hits INFJs in a specific way, not just as pain, as disorientation, as identity reconfiguration, as a recalculation of what life is. Here's the next question. If INFJs are so emotionally intelligent, why do so many of them feel ashamed of how they grieve? I'm going to answer that next. The hidden INFJ grief problem. Because INFJs often grieve in private. They do not want surface comfort. They do not want cliches. They do not want someone to say everything happens for a reason while their nervous system is still screaming. So what happens? They become high functioning on the outside, and internally they become a closed room. And in that room, grief turns into loops, looping thoughts, looping memories, looping what ifs, looping guilt, looping the last conversation. Have you ever noticed that you can be fine for 2 weeks, then a smell, a song, a sentence, and suddenly your whole body feels like it time traveled? Good, because that is not random, that is the brain. Now we go into neuroscience, but I am going to make it human. Grief is attachment, not weakness. Grief is the brain's attachment system reacting to separation. Your brain built a map of safety around someone. A routine, a role, a future expectation. When that person is gone, your brain is still running the old program. So part of you intellectually knows, but another part of you keeps expecting them. That is why grief can feel like disbelief even when you know it happened. That is why you can accept it and still feel like it is not real. Now here is the twist that matters. Research shows that reminders of the person can activate reward circuits in the brain, including the nucleus accumbens. And that activation is associated with yearning. Translation, your brain can crave the person you lost the same way it craves relief. So when people say just move on, what they are really telling you is turn off an attachment circuit. That is not how brains work. Next question. So what makes INFJ grief different from the average person's grief? Let's answer it. The INFJ grief signature, meaning, and timelines. INFJs often grieve 2 things at once. They grieve the person, And they grieve the future that person represented, the version of life that was supposed to happen, the conversations that were supposed to happen, the apology that was supposed to happen, the growth that was supposed to happen. So INFJ grief is often not just sadness, it is the collapse of a narrative. And when a narrative collapses, the INFJ mind starts rebuilding it immediately. That is a gift. And it is also what exhausts you, because you are not just processing emotion, you are rebuilding identity. Have you ever felt like after grief, you were not just heartbroken, you were literally a different person? Yes. Because grief is a neurobiological event and an identity event. Now let's go deeper. The brain's grief network, simple but accurate. When you lose someone, your brain is doing multiple jobs at once. One, emotional pain. Social pain networks overlap with physical pain systems, which is why heartbreak can feel physical. Two, memory retrieval. Your brain is pulling up cues, images, patterns, trying to predict what happens next. Three, meaning making. You are trying to integrate the loss into your story. Four, threat detection. When safety is disrupted, the nervous system becomes hypervigilance. If you are watching this and thinking, why am I so tired? That's why. Your brain is running a full-time background process. Next question. So why do INFJs look composed but collapse later? Let's answer that, because this one is important. Delayed collapse, the INFJ time bomb. INFJs often go into protector mode first. They handle logistics. They handle people's emotions. They become the calm one, because they can. But emotional processing gets deferred. Then, weeks or months later, when the world is quiet, the body collects its debt. That is when the nightmares hit. That is when the crying hits. That is when the anger hits. That is when the numbness hits. Have you ever wondered why you can help everybody else grieve, but you feel guilty for having needs? That is the INFJ pattern. You can read rooms, you can manage atmospheres, you can anticipate emotional outcomes, but you were trained to use your ability for maintenance instead of strategy. And grief punishes that, because grief requires processing, not performance. Now let's move to the premium part, how to process grief with tools, structure, and integrity. Let me give you a distinction that will change everything. Most people think they are grieving the person. INFJs often are grieving the misalignment. The moment life proved it was not safe, not fair, not predictable. So here's the question. Are you grieving the person you lost, or are you grieving the future you can no longer trust? Stay with me, because the way you answer that changes the tools you need. Now let's look at the 4 layers of INFJ grief. Layer 1, loss. This is the reality. The person is gone. The relationship has changed. Layer 2, meaning. What does this loss say about life, about love, about God, about your identity, about safety? Layer 3, role collapse. Who were you in relation to them? Caretaker, daughter, wife, friend, student, the person who was finally understood? When that role disappears, it creates a vacuum. Layer 4, timeline rupture. The future script breaks. Your brain has to write a new one. Most grief advice only addresses layer 1. That is why INFJs feel unseen, because you are dealing with layers 2, 3, and 4 at the same time. So if the problem is layered, what does a layered solution look like? Now we talk AI tools, but responsibly. Let's say this clearly. AI is not a replacement for human connection. AI is not therapy. AI is not spirituality. AI is not a substitute for professional support if you are in danger. AI is a tool, and tools can help you structure grief so it stops drowning you. Structure reduces overwhelm. Here are 5 high-integrity ways to use AI during grief. Tool 1, the Loop Breaker Journal. Prompt the AI like this. I am grieving and my mind is looping on these 3 thoughts. Help me label the emotions, identify what I am trying to control, and write a 5-sentence grounding statement I can read when I spiral. Why it works. You externalize the loop, you name the emotion, you create a script for your nervous system. Tool 2, the timeline rewrite. Prompt. I lost someone and I keep grieving the future we were supposed to have. Help me write 2 futures, the one I lost and a new one I can build that still honors what mattered. This is not toxic positivity. This is narrative integration. Tool 3, the unsent letter method. Prompt. Help me write a letter to the person I lost. Include what I loved, what I regret, what I never said, and what I need to release. Then help me write a closing paragraph that gives me permission to live. This is closure without forcing denial. Tool 4, meaning audit, prompt. Ask me 10 questions that help me identify what meaning I attach to this loss. Then summarize the meanings that are healthy versus the meanings that are harming me. INFJs need this because meaning can become a cage. Tool 5, social translation, prompt. I want to explain my grief to friends who do not understand. Write a short message that describes what I need and what I do not need. That one alone saves relationships, but what if AI makes you feel worse, like you are using a machine to cope with something sacred? Let's address that next, the ethics and boundaries of grief tech. There is grief tech emerging right now, including platforms that position themselves as grief support or ongoing connection tools. One example in the grief tech space is You Only Virtual, which explicitly references grief and communication with deceased loved ones.
Christy isn't a character from a supernatural film. She's speaking in a documentary called Eternal You. The film explores a growing digital industry which allows people to talk to the dead using artificial intelligence. Well, not really, but some people are seeing it as the next best thing.
I wanted to say the last conversation I never got to have with him.
After Christy's best friend Cameron sadly passed away, she found out there was a way to speak to him again. Well, an AI-generated version of him.
I was like, they can do that? And it's just like the person? I was like, okay, maybe I should do it.
There's an increasing number of startups using AI to create chatbots representing dead people. The one Christy used is called Project December. These so-called grief bots or dead bots are created using large language models or LLMs. They're trained on an enormous dataset to learn how humans speak. Think ChatGPT, but there's a key difference.
Some of the services are using a lot of private data. For example, they storing all the messages a person have ever sent to another person in order to recreate how someone's speaking in a way.
The idea is that when you talk to one of these bots, it'll respond to you sounding just like the person who's passed away. But this kind of AI can be unpredictable in its interactions with a user.
It was creepy. There were things that scared me, and a lot of stuff I didn't want to hear.
You cannot control what is the answer of these generatives AI, and that makes it so complicated. We are talking about a very specific kind of group of users. They're in a very vulnerable state. They were looking for some closure, and the opposite happened.
I'm now going to call my dead mom and wish her a happy birthday.
Connecting to your persona.
Justin Harrison has a different perspective. He's the founder and CEO of a startup called You Only Virtual. The company creates AI versions of people called personas, and the very first one he created was based on his own mother.
My mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It became very much this sort of existential crisis. It triggered in me like, we've got to do something different about death. And I felt like this is one of the many problems that we're meant to solve. And I love you and happy birthday.
Thanks, baby. I love you too.
There are moments when only your mom or only your dad can make you feel better. They're the only ones that can say that right thing in the way they would say it to you. And that's an inquantifiable help. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to say that in our lifetimes, we're going to see personas or persona-like technology integrated with very realistic robots. And frankly, I'm excited about it.
I am not here to tell you what to believe. I am here to tell you to protect your mind. If you are grieving, you are neurologically suggestible. You are emotionally hungry. You are meaning hungry. So your boundaries matter. Here are 3 rules. Rule 1, do not use AI to replace real relationships. Rule 2, do not use AI to avoid grief. Use it to structure grief. Rule 3, if a tool increases obsession, yearning, or detachment from reality, step back and talk to a professional. Remember, yearning and reward circuitry are linked in prolonged grief research. So what does healthy processing actually look like for an INFJ? Here's the practical blueprint, the INFJ Grief Blueprint, practical and premium. If you want to process grief without becoming emotionally shut down, use this weekly cycle. Step 1, one grief appointment a week. 30 minutes, timer on, you sit with it. Music, photos, prayer, journaling, whatever fits you, but you stop running from it. Step 2, one meaning boundary. Pick one meaning that is harming you. Example, this loss means I will always be alone. Or this loss means I can never trust anyone. Then challenge it. Ask, is that truth or is that pain talking? Step 3, one body anchor, walk, lift, stretch, breath work. Grief is stored in the body. If you do not metabolize it physically, it will show up as sleep issues, anxiety, and exhaustion. Step 4, one connection rep, one person, one text, one call, even if it is short. Because INFJs isolate, then wonder why they feel invisible. Step 5, one future seed, write one sentence. This week, I will build one new piece of my life. Not a whole life, one piece, that keeps you from freezing. What if you are not grieving a death, but you are grieving a breakup, a betrayal, a life you lost, or a version of yourself? Good, because grief is not only death, loss is loss. And your brain processes attachment rupture in similar ways. Now let's land this with a story. Let me describe the INFJ moment I see again and again. An INFJ will say quietly, I'm fine, and they will mean it in that moment. But functioning is not healing. Then one day, later, alone, they hear a voice note or find a photo, and the grief hits like it was never processed. That moment is not failure, that moment is delayed integration. So instead of asking, why am I still grieving? Ask, which layer am I in? Am I in loss? Meaning, role collapse, timeline rupture. And if you can name the layer, you can choose the tool. That is power. That is emotional intelligence. Here's what I want you to take from this. INFJs do not just grieve events, they grieve meaning. And that is why your grief can feel heavier, longer, and more isolating. But it is also why when you heal correctly, you come out with something rare: wisdom, discernment, clarity, a deeper relationship with life. If you want my private frameworks, prompts, and deeper breakdowns, join my free off algorithm email list. I am going to leave the link in the description. And if you want to binge watch the rest of the series, go to my INFJ playlist next. It is designed to stack. Now I want to ask you one final question. When you grieve, do you isolate more or do you overfunction more? And which one is costing you your peace? I'll see you in the next one.